I've never been afraid of heights. That's what I told myself as I stared out the airplane window at 36,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, watching my career plummet toward the dark waters below. My name is Carla Bishop, and until approximately 17 minutes ago, I was the Chief Innovation Officer at Noventra Systems, one of the fastest-growing biotech companies in North America. Now I was nobody. Just another passenger with a glass of mediocre red wine and a corporate execution notice lighting up my phone screen. The email came exactly 1 hour after takeoff from Toronto Pearson International Airport. I remember checking the timestamp twice, the calculation immediate and damning in my mind. They had timed it precisely, waiting until they knew I was unreachable, trapped in a metal tube crossing the Atlantic with spotty Wi-Fi and no ability to fight back. Dear Carla, the email from Tristan Vellman, our VP of Human Resources, began with artificial warmth. After careful consideration and extensive review of our organizational strategy, we regret to inform you that your position at Noventra Systems has been eliminated, effective immediately. Effective immediately. While I was literally mid-air, I took another sip of wine, feeling it burn down my throat. At 44, I had guided the development of 2 FDA-approved AI medical platforms. I had built Noventra's innovation division from the ground up. My keynote at the Biotech Horizons 2025 conference in Amsterdam tomorrow was the reason half the attendees had registered in the first place. And now I was fired, with a vague reference to organizational strategy adjustment as the only explanation. This wasn't a coincidence. This was Leo Danner's work, our new Chief Strategy Officer, brought in 6 months ago by our increasingly hands-off CEO, Randall Keene. Leo, with his Stanford MBA and his slick presentations about disruptive innovation frameworks that were just recycled consulting slides with our logo slapped on them. Leo, who had been systematically excluding me from meetings, changing processes I'd established, and most recently, promoting Maya, a talented but wildly inexperienced intern, to product planning roles that circumvented my entire department. The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, and my wine sloshed dangerously close to the rim of the plastic cup. I steadied it, just as I tried to steady my thoughts. They thought they were clever. Fire me while I'm on a plane, headed to represent the company at the industry's biggest conference. By the time I landed, they would have disabled my email, revoked my access credentials, and probably already sent a company-wide announcement framing my departure as a mutual decision. I opened the conference app on my phone. There I was, still featured prominently on the home screen. Keynote address: The Future of AI-Driven Diagnostics in Personalized Medicine, Carla Bishop, Chief Innovation Officer, Noventra Systems. My face stared back at me from the banner images. My name was on the printed programs, the digital schedules, the main control panel. They had fired me, but they hadn't removed me from the stage. And if they were going to leave a microphone in my hands, they were going to hear things they never wanted the world to know. I closed my eyes, feeling the hum of the engines beneath me. 36,000 feet above the earth, with nowhere to go but forward, I made my decision. They thought they'd silenced me. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Amsterdam welcomed me with a soft drizzle and gray skies that matched my mood perfectly. The taxi driver chatted amiably as we drove from Schiphol Airport to the gleaming RAI Convention Center, where Biotech Horizons 2025 was already underway. I hadn't slept on the flight. Instead, I'd spent those hours planning, thinking, and making notes in my journal, the old-fashioned paper one I always carried, the one thing they couldn't remotely wipe. The conference center loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the cloudy sky. Banners hung from light posts along the approach, and there I was again, my professional headshot smiling confidently next to the conference logo. The irony wasn't lost on me. Important person. Yes, the driver asked, nodding toward one of the banners. I used to be, I replied. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, confused, but didn't press further. I checked into my hotel room paid for by Noventra before they decided to terminate me and took a quick shower. The hot water did little to wash away the rage and humiliation that had been building since that email arrived. But it did help clear my head. I dressed carefully in a charcoal gray suit I'd packed for a panel discussion scheduled for the second day. It was sharper, more severe than the friendly blue ensemble I'd planned to wear for my keynote. Today called for armor, not approachability. The welcome reception was being held in the convention center's grand atrium. By the time I arrived, it was in full swing, hundreds of industry professionals from around the world mingling, networking, enjoying drinks and appetizers. Music played softly beneath the steady hum of conversation. I scanned the room, looking for familiar faces. It didn't take long to spot a group of Noventra employees clustered near one of the bars. Among them was Maya, the 20-something intern who'd been steadily assuming more of my responsibilities over the past months. She was animatedly talking to two senior directors who had once reported to me. I moved closer, positioning myself behind a large potted plant where I could overhear their conversation without being immediately spotted. "It's such an incredible opportunity," Maya was saying, her voice bright with excitement. "I mean, I never expected to be presenting at this level so soon." One of the directors, Paul Mercer, nodded encouragingly. "Leo thinks you're ready. And honestly, after your work on the Q3 strategy document, I agree." "Are you nervous about stepping in for Carla?" asked Sarah Winters, our director of product development. "A little," Maya admitted. "But Leo's been coaching me. We've completely reworked the presentation to focus on the future roadmap rather than technical achievements." She lowered her voice slightly. "Between us," he said, the original presentation was too backward-looking. Too much about what we've built and not enough about where we're going. "Speaking of Carla," Paul said, glancing around with a slightly uncomfortable expression, "has anyone actually heard from her?" "The announcement just said she's pursuing other opportunities, effective immediately." Sarah shrugged. "I tried texting her, but no response. Honestly, these things happen. The company's direction is changing. Not everyone adapts." I felt my nails digging into my palms. Not everyone adapts. After 6 years of building their entire innovation strategy from nothing. "I heard she's not even coming to the conference," Maya added. "Leo said we should be prepared to field questions about the transition, but keep it positive." I'd heard enough. I stepped away from my hiding spot, moving deeper into the crowd. My mind was racing, so they'd already announced my departure internally. They'd already replaced me with Maya for the keynote. Leo had been planning this for weeks, if not months. Carla Bishop, is that you?" I turned to find Cassandra Ruiz approaching me, elegant as ever in a crimson suit that stood out dramatically among the sea of navy and gray. As the chief strategy officer at Medinex Noventra's oldest and fiercest competitor, Cassandra and I had faced off across negotiating tables and competing product launches for years. But there had always been mutual respect between us, a recognition of equals. "Cassandra," I said, forcing a smile. "Good to see you." Her eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "I heard the most interesting rumor this morning, something about a sudden leadership change at Noventra." Of course she had. News traveled fast in our industry, and Cassandra had always had excellent sources. "News travels fast," I said, keeping my expression neutral. "Indeed it does." She tilted her head slightly. "I'm curious, though, if you're no longer with Noventra, why are you here? And more importantly, why is your name still on tomorrow's program as the keynote speaker?" I hesitated, then decided honesty was my best option. "They fired me while I was on the plane here. Apparently, they haven't gotten around to updating the program yet." Cassandra's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose fractionally, the equivalent of a gasp from anyone else. How extraordinarily unprofessional, even for Randall Keene. She studied me for a moment. "So, what are you going to do?" "I haven't decided yet." "Yes, you have," she said with a knowing smile. "I can see it in your eyes. You're planning something." I didn't confirm or deny it. Instead, I asked, "What would you do, Cassandra, if you were in my position?" She considered this, taking a deliberate sip of her champagne. "I'd recognize an opportunity when I saw one. You have something rare, Carla a platform and nothing to lose." She leaned closer, If you want a stage, I'll give you one. If you want revenge, I'll help you do it properly. Why would you help me? 3 reasons. First, I've always respected you, even as a competitor. Second, what they did was disgraceful, and our industry should be better than that. She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. And third, anything that damages Noventra potentially benefits Metanex. I'm not above admitting that. I couldn't help but laugh. At least you're honest about your motivations. Always. She pulled out her phone. Now, let's be practical. You're still listed as the keynote speaker. But I assume they're planning to have this Maya person take your place. I nodded. The conference management system is quite simple. As an exhibiting company, Metanex has admin access to our own presentations. Her fingers moved rapidly across the screen. The keynote is still assigned to you personally, but the company affiliation can be adjusted. I watched as she navigated through the conference management portal. There, she said finally. As far as the system is concerned, tomorrow's keynote will be delivered by Carla Bishop, Executive Advisor, Metanex. Executive Advisor. A title I just created for you. She slipped her phone back into her pocket. Whether it becomes permanent after tomorrow is entirely up to you. We've been trying to lure you away from Noventra for years. The implications of what she was suggesting hit me. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you options, Carla. Right now. What you need is a legitimate company affiliation to maintain your speaking slot. Beyond that, she shrugged elegantly. Let's see how tomorrow unfolds. I glanced across the room to where the Noventra group was still chatting, completely unaware of my presence or the plan forming in my mind. I'll need to completely rework my presentation overnight, I said, more to myself than to Cassandra. I thought you might say that. My suite has an excellent view and a well-stocked bar. Much better for creative work than a standard hotel room. She handed me a key card. Suite 1542. I'll be at executive dinners until late. The space is yours. I took the key card, feeling its weight in my palm. Thank you, Cassandra. Don't thank me yet, she said with a smile that could cut glass. Just make it worth watching. I worked through the night in Cassandra's luxurious suite, fueled by espresso from the in-room machine and a determination that burned hotter than any caffeine could. My original keynote had been titled, The Future of AI-Driven Diagnostics in Personalized Medicine. It had been designed to highlight Noventra's achievements and vision a forward-looking, inspirational address meant to cement our position as industry leaders. That presentation now lay in digital fragments, its pieces repurposed and transformed into something entirely different. The new presentation kept the same title, but its content had evolved from corporate showcase to methodical academic dissection. I was no longer selling a vision. I was delivering a masterclass in what successful medical AI development looked like and what happened when corners were cut. I created 2 hypothetical case studies. The first outlined a transparent, methodical approach to AI implementation in medical diagnostics with proper validation, extensive testing, and ethical considerations at every stage. The second described a rushed, data-poor approach focused on market deadlines rather than medical outcomes, a thinly veiled reference to the accelerated development schedule Leo had been pushing for our newest diagnostic platform. I included charts, data visualizations, and workflow diagrams, all carefully anonymized but instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with Noventra's internal processes. The slides were clinical, academic, and devastatingly precise. The final slide was my coup de grace, a failure analysis of a flawed AI diagnostic implementation that had produced dangerous false negatives in cancer screening. It was based on internal testing data from Leo's rushed project data that his team had buried in appendices and minimized in reports, but which I had carefully documented in my role as CIO. I didn't name Noventra explicitly. I didn't have to. Anyone who worked there would know exactly what I was talking about, and everyone else would be left wondering which companies in the room were cutting corners on technology that could literally kill patients if it failed. As dawn broke over Amsterdam, I reviewed my work one final time. It was precise, professional, and devastating. Not a rant, not a revenge speech, something far more powerful. A clinical autopsy of flawed innovation strategies, delivered with scientific detachment. I had rebuilt the presentation from memory, without access to Noventra's servers. But I'd been working on these projects for years. The data points, the methodologies, the results, they were all burned into my mind. I saved the presentation to a USB drive and closed the laptop. My keynote was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. I had just enough time to shower, change, and prepare myself mentally for what would undoubtedly be the most important speech of my career. Before leaving the suite, I picked up the complimentary notepad next to the phone and scribbled a brief note for Cassandra. Thank you for the space and the opportunity. Whether you hired an executive advisor or created a monster remains to be seen. Carla. The main hall of the RAI Convention Center was already filling when I arrived at 9:30 a.m. The room could hold up to 5,000 people. And from the crowd gathering, it looked like we would come close to capacity. I spotted several Noventra executives near the front, including Randall Keene, our CEO, who had apparently flown in for the conference. Leo Danner sat beside him, looking smug and relaxed. Neither had seen me yet. Behind the stage, I could hear frantic conversations taking place among the conference organizers. Ms. Bishop. A young woman with a conference badge and a headset approached me. I'm Elise, one of the event coordinators. There seems to be some confusion about your presentation today. Oh, I said innocently. Yes. We received notification from Noventra Systems that you're no longer with the company, and that another presenter would be taking your place. She glanced down at her tablet. But then we saw your company affiliation had been updated in our system to Metanex. I'm trying to sort out who's actually giving the keynote. I smiled calmly. My name is on the program, correct? Yes, but... And the registration system shows me as the speaker, just with an updated company affiliation. That's right, but Noventra is insisting. Elise, I said gently. I understand this puts you in an awkward position. But the fact is, people registered for this conference expecting to hear from me. My name is on all the materials. And I'm here, ready to speak. The only change is which company I represent. She bit her lip, clearly torn between competing imperatives. If it helps, I added, I've completely reworked my presentation to remove any proprietary Noventra content. This is now an academic and industry overview, not a corporate showcase. That seemed to reassure her somewhat. Let me check with my supervisor, she said, and hurried away. While I waited, I prepared my USB drive and reviewed my speaking notes one last time. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Years of presenting to boards, investors, and regulatory committees had trained me well. Elise returned a few minutes later, looking relieved. We've decided to proceed with you as the keynote speaker, Dr. Bishop. There was simply too little time to make changes to the program. And as you said, attendees registered expecting to hear from you. Thank you, Elise. I appreciate your professionalism. We've updated your introduction to reflect your new position with Metanex. Is executive advisor correct? Perfect. I confirmed. You'll be on in 15 minutes. Can I get you anything? Water. Water would be great. Thank you. As she left to fetch it, I gazed out at the audience through a gap in the curtains. The hall was now almost full. I could see industry leaders, researchers, investors, and journalists, including several live streaming the event for industry publications. In the front row, the Noventra contingent had grown. Maya had joined Randall and Leo, looking nervous but excited. She clutched a tablet that presumably contained the presentation she had expected to deliver. I felt a momentary pang of sympathy for her. She was talented and ambitious, just a pawn in Leo's game. But that sympathy was quickly overwhelmed by the memory of her words at the reception. Leo said the original presentation was too backward-looking. My entire career reduced to backward-looking by an intern who had been with the company for 8 months. The lights in the hall dimmed slightly, signaling that the program was about to begin. The conference chair, Dr. Helena Vasquez, approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main session of Biotech Horizons 2025. We are delighted to have with us today one of the most respected voices in medical AI development. Her pioneering work has shaped how we approach machine learning in diagnostic medicine, with 2 FDA-approved platforms that have revolutionized early detection protocols. I took a deep breath, adjusting the collar of my black suit and straightening the new badge Elise had handed me moments earlier. Carla Bishop, Executive Advisor, Medinex. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Dr. Carla Bishop, Executive Advisor at Medinex. The audience applauded as I walked onto the stage. From the corner of my eye, I could see the shock and confusion rippling through the Noventra contingent. Randall's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Leo was frantically typing on his phone. Maya looked utterly bewildered. But I wasn't here for them. I was here for the other 990 people in the room and the thousands watching the live stream. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez? And good morning, everyone, I began, my voice steady and clear. Today, I'd like to talk about the future of AI-driven diagnostics in personalized medicine, but to understand where we're going, we need to be honest about where we are and the critical choices that will determine whether these powerful technologies truly serve patients or merely serve quarterly earnings reports. I clicked to my first slide, and the journey began. For the next 45 minutes, I delivered the most precise, substantive keynote of my career. I spoke about methodologies, validation protocols, and ethical frameworks. I presented case studies that illustrated best practices and cautionary tales. And through it all, I never once mentioned Noventra by name. I didn't have to. The data spoke for itself. The charts, the workflows, the results, they told a story more damning than any accusation could have been. When I reached my final slide, the failure analysis of the flawed cancer screening algorithm, I could feel the tension in the room. The audience had been following closely, connecting dots, drawing conclusions. This case study represents what I consider to be the most dangerous approach in our field, I said, indicating the chart showing the false negative rates. When development timelines are prioritized over validation, when market pressures outweigh medical concerns, this is the result. Algorithms that miss critical diagnoses, not because the technology isn't capable, but because the process was compromised. I paused, letting the implications sink in. As an industry, we have a responsibility that goes beyond shareholder value. People trust their lives to our technologies. That trust is sacred, and it must be earned through rigorous science, transparent processes, and unwavering ethics, not marketing promises. I clicked to a black slide with a single question in white text: what will you build and why? Thank you for your attention, I concluded. I believe we have time for questions. The applause began slowly, then built to a thunderous level. People were rising to their feet, not everyone, but enough to make it clear that my message had resonated. In the front row, the Noventra section remained seated, faces frozen in various expressions of shock and anger. Randall Keene was already moving toward the side exit, phone pressed to his ear. Dr. Vasquez returned to the podium beside me. Thank you, Dr. Bishop, for that remarkably substantive presentation. We do indeed have time for questions. If you have a question, please approach one of the microphones in the aisles. Lines formed quickly at each microphone. The first question came from a woman who introduced herself as the CTO of a European hospital system. Dr. Bishop, your case study on the flawed cancer screening algorithm was disturbing. Can you speak more about how healthcare providers can verify that the AI systems they're implementing have been properly validated? An excellent question, I replied. There are several key indicators to look for. The Q&A session continued for another 20 minutes, with increasingly technical and pointed questions. I answered each one thoroughly, establishing myself not as a disgruntled ex-employee, but as a leading expert providing valuable insights to the industry. Throughout it all, I maintained my professional demeanor, never once giving any indication that this presentation was anything other than a standard academic keynote. As the session concluded and people began to file out of the hall, my phone buzzed with notifications. Live autopsy and Atyus. Who fired Carla were trending on Twitter. Industry publications were already posting analyses of the veiled critique embedded in my presentation. I gathered my materials and stepped down from the stage, immediately surrounded by attendees with follow-up questions and business cards. Through the crowd, I caught a glimpse of Cassandra Ruiz, standing at the back of the hall with an expression of undisguised admiration. She gave me a subtle nod of approval before disappearing through the exit. I had just begun speaking with a researcher from Johns Hopkins when I felt a hand grip my arm firmly. "We need to talk. Now." Randall Keene's voice was low and furious. I turned to face him, maintaining my composure. "Randall, I didn't expect to see you in Amsterdam." "Cut the crap. Carla, what you just did was a breach of your confidentiality agreement. You exposed proprietary data." "Did I?" I asked innocently. "I don't recall mentioning any company by name. I presented anonymized case studies and industry best practices. Standard academic approach." His grip tightened. "You know exactly what you did. That last case study was internal testing data." "Was it? All my sources are publicly available research and datasets. I'd be happy to provide citations." I gently but firmly removed his hand from my arm. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have colleagues waiting to speak with me." "This isn't over," he hissed. "Our legal team is already reviewing the recording." "I look forward to their analysis," I replied calmly. "I'm sure they'll find it as educational as the rest of the audience did." I turned away from him, returning to the Johns Hopkins researcher who had been waiting patiently. From the corner of my eye, I could see Randall storming away, phone already back at his ear. For the next hour, I moved through the conference center, engaged in one conversation after another with industry peers, potential collaborators, and yes, potential employers. My inbox was filling with meeting requests, speaking invitations, and interview requests from industry publications. By early afternoon, word began to spread that several senior Noventra employees had abruptly left the conference. Twitter was alive with speculation, and at least one industry blog had already published a piece titled "The Keynote That Killed a Reputation." Around 3:00 p.m., I received a text from Cassandra. "VIP Lounge, North Hall, 10 minutes. You're going to want to hear this." When I arrived at the exclusive lounge reserved for top sponsors and speakers, Cassandra was waiting with 2 espressos and a satisfied smile. "Congratulations," she said, sliding one of the tiny cups toward me. "You've caused quite the earthquake." I took the espresso gratefully. "How bad is the damage?" "Depends on whose perspective you're taking," she replied. For Noventra, 2 senior directors have already submitted resignations, effective immediately. Their stock is down 4% since the live stream ended, and 3 analyst firms have announced they're reviewing their recommendations. I absorbed this information silently, feeling a complex mix of vindication and regret. I hadn't set out to destroy the company just to expose the dangerous corner cutting that could harm patients. "And for me?" I asked finally. Cassandra's smile widened. "In the past 4 hours, I've received inquiries from 7 different companies asking if you're actually joining Metanex or if you're still on the market. Including," she added with evident satisfaction, "3 of Noventra's biggest clients. I'm guessing you told them I'm not available." "I told them that you and I are in active discussions about your future role." She studied me over the rim of her espresso cup. "Which is true, isn't it?" Before I could respond, the door to the lounge opened and a harried-looking young man in a conference staff uniform approached our table. "Dr. Bishop, I have an urgent message for you." He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a formal letter on Noventra letterhead, signed by their general counsel. It demanded that I cease and desist from making any further statements, presentations, or communications regarding Noventra Systems, its products, or its internal processes, and threatened immediate legal action if I failed to comply. I handed the letter to Cassandra, who read it quickly and laughed. "Well, that was fast," she said. "And utterly toothless. They can't prove you disclosed anything proprietary because you didn't." All they're doing is confirming that your hypothetical case study hit the mark. They're scared, I observed. As they should be. You didn't just expose Leo's project failures, you exposed their entire approach to innovation. She set the letter aside. So, about that executive advisor position. I looked down at the badge still hanging around my neck. Is that a real offer, or was it just for show? It started as convenience, Cassandra admitted. But after that performance, it's very real. In fact, I'm authorized to offer you a full C-suite position, Chief Scientific Officer, reporting directly to me, complete control over research methodology, development timelines, and validation protocols. And if I wanted to continue the work I started at Noventra. With proper validation and ethical frameworks, absolutely. That's why we want you, Carla. Not despite what you showed today, but because of it. I considered her offer. It was tempting more than tempting. But something didn't feel quite right. I need some time, I said finally. Today has been a lot. Cassandra nodded understandingly. Of course, the offer doesn't expire at midnight. She stood, smoothing her crimson suit. I have a dinner with investors tonight. You're welcome to join us. Thank you, but I think I need a quiet evening to process everything. Understood. She gathered her things, then paused. You know, in all my years in this industry, I've never seen anything quite like what you did today. You didn't just salvage your reputation, you elevated it. Whatever you decide about Metanex, remember that. After she left, I remained in the lounge, nursing a fresh espresso and reflecting on the day's events. My phone continued to buzz with notifications, messages, and emails, but I ignored them for now. I had come to Amsterdam expecting to deliver a corporate keynote, representing a company that valued my contributions. Instead, I had been fired mid-flight, replaced, and left to fend for myself. And somehow, in the process, I had found my voice not as a corporate representative, but as an independent expert speaking truth about an industry I cared deeply about. The irony wasn't lost on me. By trying to silence me, Noventra had given me the freedom to speak more honestly than ever before. By cutting me loose, they had removed the constraints that had bound me to their narrative. I wasn't sure yet what my next step would be. Metanex was one option, but not the only one. What I did know was that I wouldn't be silenced again. I finished my espresso, gathered my things, and headed back to my hotel. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and undoubtedly, new complications. But for now, I had said what needed to be said. The rest could wait. The aftermath of what industry publications would later dub the Amsterdam incident unfolded rapidly over the following weeks. By the next morning, 3 more senior Noventra employees had resigned, including Sarah Winters, who had dismissed my absence so casually at the welcome reception. The company's stock continued to slide, losing nearly 12% of its value within a week. Leo Danner gave an emergency press conference attempting to reassure investors that the company's AI diagnostic platforms were fully validated and completely safe. But his defensive tone and vague answers only fueled further speculation. 2 weeks later, an internal whistleblower leaked documents confirming that the cancer screening algorithm I had indirectly criticized had indeed shown alarming false negative rates in preliminary testing data that had been minimized in reports to senior leadership and regulatory submissions. The FDA announced a review of Noventra's most recent approval applications. 3 major hospital systems paused their implementations of Noventra technology pending the results of that review. And Randall Keene, the CEO who had allowed this culture of corner-cutting to flourish under his leadership, announced his early retirement a month after the conference. As for me, I did not immediately accept Cassandra's offer at Metanex, though it was generous and sincere. Instead, I spent the next month consulting with healthcare providers, research institutions, and regulatory bodies, helping to develop more robust standards for AI validation in medical applications. The experience had changed me. I realized that my greatest value wasn't in building technologies for a single company, but in ensuring that the entire industry maintained the highest standards of scientific integrity and patient safety. Eventually, I did join Medinex, but not as Chief Scientific Officer. Instead, I created a new role: Head of the Center for Ethical AI in Healthcare, an independent research and advisory division with the freedom to collaborate across industry lines. My first initiative was developing an open-source validation framework for medical AI applications, one that emphasized transparency, rigorous testing, and patient outcomes over development speed or market positioning. Maya, the intern who had been set up to replace me, reached out several months later. She had left Noventra shortly after the Amsterdam incident and wanted to apologize for her unwitting role in the events. I invited her to join my team at the center, where she has since become one of our most valuable researchers. Leo Danner never apologized, never acknowledged his mistakes. The last I heard, he had moved to a smaller biotech startup, where I can only hope he learned the lessons Noventra paid so dearly to teach. As for that keynote speech in Amsterdam, it has become something of a legend in the industry, regularly cited in business school case studies and ethics courses as both a cautionary tale and an example of speaking truth to power. Looking back, I realized that being fired mid-flight was the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to recognize that my true value wasn't tied to any corporate title or affiliation, but to my expertise, my principles, and my willingness to stand up for what I believed was right. They had taken my job, thinking they could silence my voice. Instead, they had amplified it beyond anything I could have imagined. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is exactly what they don't want to hear.